Yukong is Starrail's best buffer, and today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to play her like the hot fox waifu we all know she is. During Honkai Star Rail's release, many believed that investing in support characters would be safe because DPS are replaceable but supports are not. Well, f*** around and find out, because Yukong sure as hell power creeped a lot of the current supports available. That's not to say the other supports aren't usable too, but this character gives crit rate, crit damage, and attack buff all in one. Let's get into it. As a support, Yukong has the role of maintaining uptime on her buffs, and like Asta, she has a skill and buff that needs attention so she can maximize her potential. However, she goes above and beyond when it comes to her ultimate and talent. Her general game plan revolves around maintaining roaring bowstrings, which she gains from using her skill. When this is active, her allies gain attack percent so long as at least one stack is present, and if she uses her ultimate while roaring bowstring is up, allies gain crit rate and damage, which is just absolutely out of this world. Now, while the damage increases Yukong provides are insane, she also presents herself as a great weakness breaker with her talent. Since she gains an empower basic with her talent every few turns, using Yukong similar to Asta is important to unlocking her full potential. Long story short, spam her basic when you need to break an enemy, and suddenly she's a Bronya who can make use of break effect. Now, when it comes to Lightcones, Yukong is like other Harmony characters in being able to use most of them. However, when it comes to overall value, Dance 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 and Bronya's Lightcone return as the front runners depending on what you're looking for. Energy regeneration, skill point value, and a damage increase is terrific value if using Bronya's Lightcone, but this is assuming you have a properly tuned team. On the other hand, Dance 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 allows for Yukong to cosplay Bronya by giving your entire team a push while also giving crit rate and damage. Quick disclaimer, the Harmony Lightcones have some of the most versatile and usable options in the game, so using other 4-stars you have access to will work just as well. Assuming you have a proper game plan and understand tuning within your team, your choice of Lightcone will be more dependent on the encounter or who is on your team. That being said, you really can't go wrong with Dance Dance Dance. Team-wide advance forward unsurprisingly has crazy value. Who knew? Investment in Yukong's Traces is dependent on whether you use her as a break effect semi-DPS or invest in her as a tanky support. But ultimately, the two builds will overlap and share similar principles. The first is that upgrading her skill, talent, and ultimate are all key given their insane value. There isn't much to talk about here. Increasing the level of these traces allows for higher damage, which in turn allows for faster clears and enemy encounters. However, if investing in the imaginary damage traces or any Yukong-specific damage dealing nodes, the tanky support build can withhold investment until later. Yukong's Kid, Eidolon, and Traces do point her in the direction of wanting to deal some form of damage, but those who ignore damage have no reason to upgrade these traces, especially when they can prioritize their energy on other characters. That being said, Break Effect or Pseudo DPS Yukong builds, on the other hand, will see great value in upgrading these traces. I know this sounds pretty obvious, and it is, but just make sure to invest in the playstyle that you're planning for. No reason to have a max basic skill when you're only using her for her crit rate buff. Deciding on what relics to use on supports, tanks, and healers nowadays is pretty tough. In this day and age, a lot of testing needs to be done regarding Break Effect, Eagle set for more turns, whether Musketeer is good enough and saves you time, the list goes on and on. However, I found a few options that make the most sense when talking about Yukong. First and foremost, a Break Effect build will use Tifa Shooting Meteor given the free stat, but this is assuming Yukong still has enough speed to buff her team before they take a turn. To be clear, Yukong has a much easier time breaking than most given her talent, so this build and relic set has great value. Alternatively, there is always value in using Musketeer pieces that you have lying around, since the speed is welcome and it's a multi-use relic set. The Eagle set also provides great value since a forward advancing passive allows you to use more skills, more ultimates, and therefore give more damage. When it comes to planar sets, Fleet of the Ageless can do no wrong, but the Banditry and Von Walk sets will come in handy depending on your build. If aiming to cycle more ultimates and extended memory of chaos fights, Von Walk shines best, whereas the Banditry set can supplement a high break effect threshold build. Now, when it comes to main stats, the build will dictate certain pieces, but in general, speed main stat boot is king. And then there's a few different routes to go down. For a break effect build, using a defensive main stat like HP percent will work wonders for chest since the break effect damage cannot be altered by crit rate, crit damage, or attack. Regarding her rope in this build, using energy regen will be her best in slot across the board since getting her ultimate a turn earlier is insane value. When deciding on her orb, a defensive or imaginary main stat will suffice depending on the stat line and survivability of your Yukong. And for other pure support builds, relying on defensive main stats is king while allowing energy regeneration on your rope to support the damage of your team. That was a mouthful, but here's a rundown on her substat priority. Being speed tuned to go ahead of your damage dealers is key when building buffers in Honkai Star Rail, and Yukong is no different. In the same vein, surviving enemy hits is equally as important so that you can maintain uptime on damage buffs. After speed and survivability are taken care of though, a focus on break effect to further abuse Imaginary's debuffs is ideal. So from the top, several builds work, but a simple build would just involve having speed boot and defensive main stats while using an energy regeneration rope. Anything more complicated and you'll dip into break effect. Ah, a breath of fresh air. 4-star Eidolons. Yukong's early Eidolons are great value, but in general, these additions to her kit are no different than any other. Being a 4-star does mean that you'll have easier access to them, but ultimately they are quality of life or moderate increases to efficiency/damage. Her first Eidolon provides a speed increase to all allies for 2 turns, which does remind me of a mini Asta buff, but it only applies once per battle, so it's not nearly as insane as it could be. Her second Eidolon provides a decent increase in energy depending on the fight and who's on Yukong's team, but TLDR, it's a nice increase to her total ultimate casts. This is the part of the Eidolon section where I note that her third and fifth Eidolons are flat stat increases and terrific, but they are just that, static and stable increases that aren't that sexy. Sorry. Yukong's fourth Eidolon is a decent increase to damage, but her sixth is where the real magic happens. At a glance, Bowstring Thunderclap seems nothing more than a quality of life to her kit, but this change alters how frequently roaring bowstrings will be present and also allows her to use less skill points in general. So with this change, not only do you reap the reward of having crit rate, damage, and an attack buff, but you also save skill points in the process. Win, 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 and win. It is nice to see that a 4-star does have access to meaningful changes through her Eidolons, so even if you aren't much of a puller or a whale, this is good news for you. Good luck on your pulls, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you on the flip side. I know I haven't been mentioning it nearly as much as I should, but this Yukong character really does warp honkaistarrail. And when you take a look at her kit and what options she has as a Harmony character, it should be no surprise when I say that she can fit into every single team composition. She does shine best in high damage teams or when taking 2 DPS, but she alone provides damage increasing buffs that are equal to, if not better than her peers. To start, her buffs don't wear off unless she herself is unable to obtain roaring bowstrings, and that isn't even addressing the massive 31.5% crit rate and 78% crit damage she provides. Though other buffers provide significant increases as well, this introduction of crit rate helps eliminate the need for crit rate chests entirely. If pairing Yukong with Hun characters, using crit rate chests is even less value since Lightcones like Silas provides massive amounts as well. What this all means, however, is that she's a godlike support character and you should take her anytime you need damage. Enough stalling though, let's talk team composition. An accessible team revolving around Yukong, including your favorite windman Dan Heng, followed by Serval for AoE and the Fire Trailblazer for protection, is very strong. To be clear, this is an Asta-like composition that focuses on dealing high damage and fast clears through 2 DPS as opposed to 1. The second DPS or the tank can be swapped out depending on healing, cleansing, or difficulty of the boss, but ultimately this team clears content extremely fast even without having access to any 5-stars. Dan Heng with attack, crit rate, and damage really start to take over encounters, especially if he has the Eidolon that gives him an extra turn after defeating an enemy with his ultimate. But that pales in comparison to the overall impact that an AoEer like Serval and a single target god like Dan Heng can do together. And if you can imagine for a moment, 60 free crit rate and 150 crit damage really starts to add up when you're constantly eliminating enemies. And that's just the most accessible team. Now when it comes to finding the perfect damage composition, look no further than Yukong paired with Sela, Bronya, and Tingyu to really start your engines. Yes, this is overkill, and yes, you can remove one or both of the support characters for Luocha, Bailu, Japard, etc., but this character is unethical when it comes to the overall stat increases that she provides. I cannot stress enough how impactful 31.5% crit rate is when rolling for gear, and you at home have certainly experienced the pain of rolling one too many quantum orbs that lands on effect hit rate or flat defense. That aside, the glass cannon composition allows for the speediest of clears when survivability isn't an issue, but in case it is, the newly released 5-star Luocha allows for a continued aggressive healing without skipping a beat. The part is cool too, as always. Having shielding, healing, and cleansing paired with big damage Sela? GG's. Well, what else is there to say? Somehow Hoyoverse released 2 of the strongest characters we've ever seen in one day. Doing the job of other supports or buffers is one thing, but having the ability to combine and consolidate all into one is kind of unfair if I'm being honest. Similar to how Luocha combines the best of Natasha and Bailu, Yukong takes the best of Asta and Bronya and creates the perfect Frankenstein buffer. At the end of the day, all characters in honkaistarrail are great, but it is interesting to see how powerful the newly released characters are when the game is still so new. I made a similar warning in my Luocha video and it still applies here, but as a warning, nothing that Yukong provides is out of the blue or extraordinary. Yes, the added crit rate is different, but ultimately the concept of a damage increase is not game breaking and will not suddenly clear you Memory Chaos Floor 10 when you were otherwise unable to clear it. That's it for today though. These 2 new imaginary characters are nuts, and I hope that this guide taught you something or helped you better understand Yukong. As always, you can check out my Twitch, Discord, and Twitter to find out what theory crafting I'm doing or if you need help. But finally guys, make sure to let me know what you liked or disliked about Yukong in the comment section, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one. Take it easy. Bye bye.